You're watching TVC Breakfast. Following the just concluded negotiation between the federal government and organized labor, the latter is now demanding that implementation of the 30,000 naira new national minimum wage start from the day it was signed into law on April the 18th, meaning that the federal and state governments will have to clear a backlog of 5 months in line with the adjusted wage for workers to prevent what labor describes as an avoidable round of agitation. But some states have openly said they will not be able to pay the 30,000 naira minimum wage. Both negotiating teams finally agreed on 23.2% increase for workers at grade level 7, 20% for those at grade level 8, 19% for workers at grade level 9, 16% for those at grade level 10 to 14, and 14% for workers at grade level 15 to 17. Joining me now via Skype is a public finance and policy analyst, Olusegun Elemo. Good morning and thank you for joining us on TVC Breakfast.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Well, organized labor is talking tough. It is now saying that 5 months arrears must be paid by state governors. How confident are you that the state governors will be able to meet up, seeing that some had complained that they couldn't even pay the 30,000 naira sum some are still owing their workers? What do you see playing out?
Well, from my own standpoint, I think the labor people are pushing the demand too high. Although the president signed the bill in April 2019, but I think saying that the backlogs of 5 months should be paid, we have to consider the fiscal condition of some of these states. Even before the increase in the minimum wage, they were even it was difficult for most of them to pay the salary. I mean, the 18,000 naira minimum wage at the time. So having pushed it to 30,000 now, many of them are still struggling with their fiscal condition on how to meet up with this new demand. And you know that one of the reasons why the VAT was increased from 5% to 7.5% is such that 85% of the revenues generated from that corner will go to subnational entities so they can meet their minimum wage obligation. But the concern again is, are we going to spend the whole of the money we get from VAT on recurrent expenditure? So all of these issues are of great concern at this moment.
What Labour doesn't seem to be concerned about all of that, because it believes states have the capacity to pay these monies, because right now they are ready to clamp down on states who do not pay these arrears or pay lesser than the 30,000 naira minimum wage. They are looking at perhaps a legal action.
Yes, of course. The Labour position will always be that there must be a unitary, payment. Federal government and state unifying on the minimum wage. But it goes to show again the kind of fiscal practice in Nigeria, and we've always said this, that the solution to this problem is to have a fiscal federalism where states can actually determine their own labor wage depending on their condition and their productivity level in those states. It happens in the US. In the US, you have different states who have different kinds of wages for the labor force. So it's not a unitary wage system. Like we now practice in Nigeria, and that's the distortion here. For instance, you want a state like Oyo State or Ekiti State to pay the same as Lagos State and Rivers State. So where is the revenue?
Federal governments, Labour have agreed on a national minimum wage. Now, the ability of state governments to pay is another kettle of fish entirely. Are you concerned about this issue?
Yes, certainly, I am concerned. I'm concerned because if you look at the 2020 budget, it had made provision for the minimum wage. And the way the government wanted to ensure that minimum wage obligation is met is to increase VAT from 5% to 7.5%. The challenge is that even with the VAT increase, many of these states will still not be able to pay the minimum wage. I understand the position of Labour because even now we're talking about minimum wage. Some are talking about the living wage, and whether the new minimum wage is actually sufficient to take public officials home at the end of the month. That's another issue entirely. When the previous minimum wage was signed in 2011, you recall that it was about 140% increase. And at that time, it was 10.8% inflation. Between 2011 and 2017, the inflation grew to 16.5%.
True.
That minimum wage of 18,000 at that time, wasn't had reduced the purchasing power of an average worker in Nigeria. And now that the minimum wage is rising from 18 to 30, it's just about 66% increase. So I understand that, I understand the position of Labour and why the backlogs need to be clear, but they also need to put into this discussion the fiscal condition of the country and many of the states.
Okay, so in all of this now, how should Labour handle this issue of states? Because according to the news this morning, Labour is saying they are ready for a showdown with states who are saying they cannot or they will not be able to pay the new national minimum wage. So how should they handle this?
It's going to really be a showdown, and the reason is because everything is lopsided. Everything is lopsided because we're calling for restructuring, and this is just the best time to do it. There's no revenue to meet recurrent obligations of both the federal government and the states. You see that the VAT now, all of the VAT will go into recurrent. What the taxpayers that will be funding the VAT, the ordinary Nigerians that will be funding this new minimum wage, what will be their benefit in terms of infrastructure? Now, it's going to be a showdown between Labour guys and the state government. But I think the ultimate solution is to have fiscal federalism, where states can determine on their own how they want minimum wage issues to be handled.
If everyone has been calling for this same, I've been giving the same suggestion you have proposed now, fiscal federalism, restructuring, but won't that make the center less powerful? That's on the one hand, and will that ensure that states are able to pay the new national minimum wage?
The center has to be less powerful. The center cannot handle everything. The federal government cannot handle everything. The federal government cannot be handling basic education. The federal government cannot be handling issue of policing. The federal government cannot handle everything. The federal government cannot handle the issue of minimum wage and be determining at the center what states who don't have control over their resources should pay to workers. That is clear. We should accept that. Okay. Once that is accepted, then we can move forward. The other thing is the cost of governance, even at subnational level. So you see state governors hiring assistants, special assistants, and packing all of these people, and it blows up the cost of governance at subnational. And I think this is what these are some of the issues that the Labour guys are considering. And say, okay, if you can reduce cost of governance, maybe you can save more money to pay the minimum wage. But the minimum wage is not all that it is about governance.
All right, Olusegun Elemo, thank you so much for talking to us on this particular issue.